the boy of the plains. In the early 19th century, under the vast, sweeping skies of the Great Plains, a boy was born into the Hunkpapa band of the Lakota Sioux. Named Jumping Badger, he was a child of the land where the buffalo roamed free, and the grass whispered tales of freedom and strength. Growing up, Jumping Badger was no stranger to the life of a warrior. His early years were spent learning the art of the hunt, the dance of battle, and the sacred songs of his people. But it was his vision quest at the age of 10 that would set him apart. In a vision, he saw a buffalo bull sitting calmly amidst a storm, a symbol of resilience and power. From that day, he was known as Tatanka Iyotake, Sitting Bull, the making of a leader. Sitting Bull's youth was marked by skirmishes with neighboring tribes and the encroaching presence of the white settlers. His bravery in these early conflicts earned him respect among his peers, but it was his wisdom in peace that truly distinguished him. He advocated for unity among the Lakota bands, understanding that only together could they face the tide of change sweeping across their lands. By the 1850s, Sitting Bull had become a chief, not just by birthright, but by merit. His leadership was tested when the US government began to enforce treaties that demanded the Sioux cede vast territories. Sitting Bull's response was one of diplomacy, negotiation, and when those failed, resistance. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, the year 1876, was a turning point. The US Army, under the command of General George Armstrong Custer, aimed to force the Sioux and Cheyenne onto reservations by any means necessary. Sitting Bull, along with Crazy Horse, gathered a massive force of warriors in the valley of the Little Bighorn. In a vision before the battle, Sitting Bull saw soldiers falling from the sky, their hats tumbling after them. This vision was interpreted as a prophecy of victory. On June 25, 1876, this prophecy came true when Custer's 7th Cavalry was overwhelmed and defeated by the combined Sioux and Cheyenne forces. This event, known as Custer's Last Stand, would echo through history as a symbol of Native American resistance. Exile in the North, the aftermath of the victory was not peace but pursuit. The US Army intensified its efforts to capture Sitting Bull, forcing him and his followers to flee north into Canada. For 4 years, they lived in relative peace but also in exile, far from the lands they cherished. The Canadian plains offered refuge, but the harsh winters and dwindling buffalo herds took their toll. In 1881, Sitting Bull returned to the United States, surrendering at Fort Buford under the promise of a return to his homeland. The showman and the prophet. Back in America, Sitting Bull was not allowed to live freely. He was placed on the Standing Rock Reservation. In an ironic twist of fate, he joined Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show, where he was exhibited as the great chief who defeated Custer. This period was one of personal survival, but also of cultural degradation in the eyes of many of his people. However, Sitting Bull never lost his spiritual bearings. He became an advocate for the ghost dance, a movement that promised the return of the buffalo and the old ways. This revival of traditional practices was seen by the US government as a potential for rebellion, leading to increased tension. The final stand. In December 1890, fearing that Sitting Bull was stoking the flames of resistance, Indian Agency police were sent to arrest him. On the morning of December 15th, at his cabin on the Standing Rock Reservation, a confrontation ensued. In the chaos, Sitting Bull was shot and killed by one of the police officers. His death was not just the end of a man, but symbolized the end of an era. The ghost dance movement was soon brutally suppressed at Wounded Knee, marking one of the last major armed conflicts of the American Indian Wars. Legacy of the Plains. The death of Sitting Bull did not end his influence, but rather crystallized it into a legacy that transcended time. His grave at Fort Yates became a pilgrimage site for those seeking to honor his memory, while his name became synonymous with Native American resilience. In the decades following his death, stories of Sitting Bull's wisdom, bravery, and compassion were passed down through generations, both within and beyond the Lakota community. His life was an anthem of resistance, but it was also a narrative of cultural preservation. He had fought not just for land, but for the survival of a way of life, the Lakota way, which celebrated harmony with nature and the spirit world. The revival of the spirit. As the 20th century progressed, interest in Native American culture grew. Scholars, activists, and artists began to delve into the rich tapestry of indigenous history, with Sitting Bull often at the forefront of this cultural renaissance. His leadership in the face of overwhelming odds was re-examined, not just as history, but as a beacon for contemporary struggles for indigenous rights. The 1970s saw a resurgence in Native activism, with movements like the American Indian Movement, AIM, drawing inspiration from figures like Sitting Bull. His name was chanted in protests, his image painted on murals, and his philosophy woven into the fabric of modern indigenous activism, a leader for all seasons. Sitting Bull's legacy also transcended borders. His story resonated with oppressed peoples worldwide, becoming a symbol of resistance against colonial oppression. His life was studied in schools, portrayed in books, films, and plays, each medium capturing different facets of his complex character: the strategist in battle, the philosopher in council, the mystic in prayer. In his homeland, efforts were made to preserve his legacy. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe, where he once led, actively promotes his teachings and the preservation of their language, traditions, and land rights. The tribe hosts annual celebrations in his honor where the stories of Sitting Bull are shared, ensuring that his vision of a united people living in harmony with the earth continues to inspire. The buffalo returns. In a poetic twist of fate, the buffalo, so central to Sitting Bull's visions and the Lakota way of life, began to make a comeback. Conservation efforts, driven partly by the recognition of cultural significance, led to the restoration of bison populations across North America. This revival is seen by many as a fulfillment of Sitting Bull's prophecy about the return of the buffalo, symbolizing the potential for cultural revival and healing. Beyond the horizon. Sitting Bull's story is not just of one man, but of a people's spirit that refuses to be extinguished. His vision of the sitting buffalo amidst the storm was not merely a personal symbol, but a collective one, representing endurance, peace, and the cyclical nature of life. In the 21st century, as the world grapples with new challenges, from climate change to cultural erosion, Sitting Bull's life lessons continue to be relevant. He remains a figure who looks beyond the immediate horizon, urging us to live in balance with nature, to value peace over conquest, and to remember that even in the darkest storms there is a place of calm and strength, much like the buffalo in his vision, sitting peacefully watching over the plains.